Greetings, everyone. Here we are with another turning of the page. Another turning of the page. Oh my goodness, all those shorts, and now it's worked its way into my my default old speech pattern. Anyways, this is an overview video for Tales of the Valiant Player's Guide from Kobold Press. This is their Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition replacement rules set. First book, boom. And they also have a Game Master screen out, and the Game Master guide will be coming out in the near future. But anyways, this was one of the early announcements of the what I'm going to call the 5th edition Clone Wars. And this is Kobold Press's answer to WotC and the OGL scandal from a year or two back. So anyways, as you can see, it's a fairly nice looking book. Very good artwork overall, front and back. It MSRPs for $59.99. Want to pull a sticker off the back. Very careful, we. That's fine with me. But as you can see, the MSRP is right there. You can buy this off of Amazon as well as the Kobold Press website. It is a reasonable thickness book. It is roughly equivalent in thickness to the Player's Handbook for Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition, or say the 2014 Player's Handbook. It is ever so slightly larger, if you can tell. If you can work it out between the whole, all the pieces of paper I have stuck in my Player's Handbook. The 2014 Player's Handbook for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition has 316 pages, and this has over 378 pages plus. So, let's see what's inside this. First and foremost, we open it up. We have this nice page, the anti-chamber page section. Player's Handbook with a plain touched character around the cover. Art. You have credits here. With special thanks and all the little blurbs. And you have the basic table of contents right here. And they contain the untitled art for the Player's Handbook right here, but also the collector's edition of the Player's Handbook right here. They refer to it as a Player's Guide. The table of contents continues on to the next 2 pages. It is actually quite well laid out overall, as you can see. So it's quite easy to find what you want in this book. Look, with a fairly good reason. Here's some nice artwork of a evil spellcaster. And the table of contents continues on to another page. And we have this nice introduction right here. A lot of the other books happened, like the 2024 Player's Handbook from Wizards of the Coast will have like oftentimes a full page artwork starting at each chapter, where they only have like half pages here. So they go over the quick introduction right here of what a TTRPG is, how to play a fantasy, and the concept of fantasy, what are dice, and so forth. Safety tools and various other things that's supposed to be in here. Agreement around lines. As per usual in this modern day and age, they have to like print out a little section right here talking about, some people have issues with certain things. And generally, there's these tools you can use online. My general advice when it comes to a TTRPG, it's the old OSR, old school advice on stuff that might disturb people, is you get around to talking to people and you simply ask them, is there anything that you are terrified of or anything like that, and you particularly don't like seeing in your games. And then as a game master, you don't put that stuff in your games, and that's it. You don't have to use like lines and veils and a whole bunch of other stuff and X cards and shit like that. You might go to a fade to black situation where, say, like someone's going to go and have sex with that barmaid over there. You might fade to black on that. Like, you take her back to your room. You just roll for performance or something like that. And yeah, you did a good night. You two had a good night, and there you go. You have character creation. I do like the step-by-step instructions. Step 0, gather materials. That's very obvious, That is, I absolutely agree with that. Step 1, create a character concept. This is not make the character. This is come up with what kind of character you want to play as. I would amend this, and I would write down, instead of this, talk with other players and come up with character concepts. Multiple for each player. And then each player decides what kind of characters they want. That way you don't come to a game with like 3 druids or 4 wizards, kind of thing. Step 2, choose character class. I personally disagree with the choice of having character class be your second choice. Your next step after you say like coming up with character concepts and talking with other players, you might actually want to roll or have your determined stats given out, just in case the game master wants to do standard array. That's okay. Then you go right to assigning your stats. If you go with a roll method, then you end up with a series of numbers, and then you're like, oh, okay, this is the set of options I have for my rolls, and okay, these are the rolls that are great with these classes, and I'm good with that. I'm going to inevitably end up with a person. I've already had this happen before. Come into the comments on my video and say, well, you just use standard array and you just arrange stuff like that. And like, not every game master does standard array. Some game masters have standard array as your backup option, where they say, you can go ahead and roll stats. However, if you roll less than a 75, you can go ahead and use standard array. And that's your backup option. Or they say you can roll for stats, and then if it doesn't work out, you go ahead and use the point buy system in the book to determine what your points are. And they happen to have a point buy system here. In step 3, the 3 methods, you have rolling, which is the first method. You have second method, which is point buy, and then you have the third method, which is standard array. So I personally don't care for the fact that people auto-assume, hey, standard array, it's the standard. Boom. Because standard array has never been the universal standard with these systems. Dating back to the original D&D, you can barely make it out up here. The prime option that people used was rolling for stats. The funnest option is rolling for stats. Makes the character more interesting. And a good game master can and manage to deal with one character having really high stats and one character having really low stats. And some classes only become good when you have multiple high stats, or some classes, the classes that require high stats are like monk or artificer, where some of the classes like wizard and warlock or sorcerer, you don't need many high stats. You just need 1 or maybe 2. So there you go. So I completely disagree with having the class as the second option, the second step, and then determining your ability scores as the third. Determining ability scores should be the soonest option ahead of determining class, background, and other stuff like that. So let's go from there. And then we go all the way to step 4, choose a lineage. I like the choice of term lineage or ancestry or stuff like that as opposed to race or species. Species is actually worse than race. Species has a lot more connotations to it. Technically, you're not supposed to crossbreed species, and if you do manage to do it, there's often severe defects in the organism in which it occurs, such as they never mature into adult, they're stuck in a juvenile state, or they never stop growing, or they have extreme high rates of cancer, or severe mental impairment, stuff like that. So if you're going to get fussy about race or species, and you want to avoid something, I would say species a worse choice is than as bad a choice as race than anything else. Because I happen to know some nerds, and the funny thing about nerds is some of them are really fussy about things. And if you use the term species, you're going to get them like, well, technically, if it's classified as a species, you cannot crossbreed a species, and therefore there's no half-breeds. So there you go. So I do like the choice of lineage and heritage as their primary option. Heritage is basically a sub-race or a subspecies for the system. I also do very much like the fact that they have a nice chart down here that demonstrates if your PC or player character starts at X level range, this is the type of equipment you should have. And this is the combination of, or the price value of the magic items your character should have right here. So that's a really nice, intelligent feature they put into this system here. After step 4, lineage, you got step 5, your heritage. Step 6 is your background. Considering that you have already just chosen your lineage and heritage, you actually have a very good idea what kind of background would be best for your character overall. So there you go. I do like that combination of that order of sequence of action. And then you have step 7, which is starting equipment. You pretty much have figured out by now what your character is going to be, their backstory, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. So equipment is very easy to pick out very fast. And then on this page, you have a nice little section on the final checklist for step 8 of filling in the blanks. The final checklist, making sure that you don't forget anything of importance. And then they explain the leveling up methods, such as awarding XP or tracking milestones. And they happen to have a nice little chart down here for the XP, as your characters would level up and how much XP they would need. Optional rules, multi-classing. They retain the multi-classing optional or variant rule from the 2014. So multi-classing is not a default feature. Unlike the 2024 Dungeons & Dragons, which is multi-class is now a default feature. You also have alternatives in experience and a little information on hit points. Explaining the proficiency, class features, and the no overlapping features rule, as well as the chart for combining multi-class levels for spell slots and stuff like that. You have a very nice pair of pages explaining the character sheets in depth. I do heavily approve of that. And then you have the character classes. And I do really like this very much that they still have nice artwork for the book, but they also intelligently made choices of explaining the components of the character classes, the universal concepts such as spell casting classes and magic source and spell circles and spell slots and cantrips and rituals and known and prepared spells. And they have a nice little summary chart right here. I personally am a big fan of any system that has charts like this, or graphs or anything like that, because people learn various different ways. And some people are really good at learning from reading something. They can read it and they can memorize it and they can mentally work it through their mind. People actually divide into two different categories on that in itself. There's people who are really good at memorizing things on one spectrum range, from terrible all the way to extremely good. And then there's also people who are very good at comprehending or having a malleable understanding of concepts, such as there's a range of like very poor to extremely good, and they're completely independent of each other, by the way. So I've known some people who could literally read something, memorize it exactly, and then you ask them a question about it, and all they can do is recite the thing. And then you ask them to explain it, and they recite it again because they have super high memory capacity, but they have shit comprehension. And then you have some people who have really high comprehension but shit memory. So when they actually learn something, they understand it extremely deeply and they can deconstruct it back to you very effectively. And you can ask them questions about it, and they can propose hypotheticals and go back and forth about it and stuff like that. But they can't remember the exact wording of anything. And then you have people who are both, and then there's on occasion people who have neither. And then there's people in the mix in the middle. And most humans are mixed in the middle between those two categories. So on this chart here, it is actually very nicely laid out. You have the classes, you have quick description, you have the hit dice, the key abilities for that class, the save proficiencies, and the equipment proficiencies on that column, which pretty much covers all the important stuff you truly want to know. It might have been really cool if they put a tag right here: martial, hybrid, martial, hybrid, martial, hybrid, martial, spellcaster on there, just in case people will need to know, hey, I want a quick glance what kind of martials I have, or half-caster hybrid classes. There you go. There's also half-casters and there's hybrids. Like a druid is a hybrid class which can do some martial stuff, but also is mostly castery, like a 3/4 caster, 1/4 martial, where a let me think here, a paladin is like 50-50, half caster, half martial, or like actually like 75% martial with 50% a half caster aspect to them. So they do a very nice job of explaining this out here. Yet again, they also go into the spellcasting distinctions on this chart right here, which actually breaks down: does this class get cantrips? Yes or no. Does this class get rituals? Yes or no. How many spells known? Several, all divine, all primal, all small number in spellbook. And do you prepare? So that is actually an exceedingly nice feature they incorporated into this book. Unlike Level Up, which is actually another 5th edition clone, which is actually the first major one that came out. This is like the second one. Kobold Press put a lot more effort into explaining things in greater detail in their books and having things organized more friendly to newcomers. Where Level Up, Advanced 5th edition, a lot of stuff in there is really good, but they add on a lot of extra layers of mechanics like battle techniques and stuff like that to the classes, and there's own kind of system of weapon masteries and so forth. So there's an added level of complication in there. You have, from the start here, you got Barbarian, And you have your standard chart with your rages and your damage bonus and stuff like that. It's important to note, I'm backing up here, you have Barbarian, Bard, Cleric, Druid, Fighter, Mechanist. Mechanist is basically an artificer in the system. Monk, Paladin, Ranger, Rogue, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. So, there you go. We have the basic overview summary of the Barbarian. We have a person who is transformed into a bear or is a bear themselves. There is no bear lineage or species or race in this book that you can play. At some point in the future, I'm not going to put it past them to actually make a bear species or race for you to play. It is Kobold Press. On the first set of pages, it will be the default base Barbarian features. None of the spell classes, subclasses. They go over important little notations on player advice and stuff like that, and then they go into the subclasses. They happen to have Berserker, as well as the Wild Fury for the Barbarian. The Berserker is the Berserker from D&D 4th edition. Not 4th edition, 5th edition, and the Wild Fury is basically the Totem Barbarian from 5th edition. Each one of these classes is only a few pages unless they're a spellcaster, which they get a bit longer. This is the Bard, and every one of these, by the way, is basically 2 subclasses in the list of themselves. So you basically have the Bard, and then you have the Lore Bard, and the Victory Bard right here. Then you have Cleric, and then you have Life Domain, and it's a little bit longer because it's a spellcaster class. And Light Domain, and then you also have War Domain. There's a few of them that actually have more than 2 subclasses. Then you have Druid. And the Druid is actually one of those ones that actually has a bunch more. They have they actually break it down right over here. You have the Leaf Domain. You have the Shifter Domain, the Shifter one. And then that's it for that. And they explain it's only 2 for the Druid. I had like a brain for it. I thought they had more. Then you have Fighter. And they also have 2 for the Fighter. They have Spellblade as well as Weapon Master, which is basically the Weapon Mastery subclass, Battle Master class, which gets a bunch of stunts and a whole bunch of other stuff tacked on top. So you have all kinds of fun stuff with them and advanced stunts. You have the Mechanist, as I said before, which is the Artificer. And the Artificer has basically all the artificery stuff. Augments, which is instead of the enchant not invocations, magic item and creation system for the Artificer, they got augments. And then you have the Monk, and so forth. And I probably should skip along because this is going to get a really long video if I don't. Skip the Wizard. And then we have Lineage and Heritage section, and they basically go over the basic run through of what does each of the concepts mean. You happen to have a race here called the Beastkin, which you can play, which basically is your universal, oh, you want to play that bear from earlier? That's your option right there. And then you have several sub-options right here. Natural adaptations, aquatic, sturdy, agile, or avian. And then you have a little dwarf section right here. Then elf. Then human. And then kobold as a default option. Orc. Cyrodian. And so forth. As well as your small folk. By the way, the Cerdians are basically your tieflings. It's tiefling slash tiefling slash Azamar. They kind of merge the two together. And then you have the heritage section right here, which is elements of heritage, languages, and this is basically your culture section right here. Are you from a cloud culture, a cottage culture, a diaspora culture, a cosmopolitan culture, anointed heritage, and so forth? Fireforge heritage, grove heritage, nomadic heritage, or so forth. So that kind of replaces the sub races. Instead of being like a sub race, you are a gnome that grew up in a cosmopolitan area. So you have things that will be derived from your location of where you grew up, as opposed to your ancestry being deviated off one evolution tree branch and then separated out from the others. You got backgrounds right here and talents. Talents are essentially what they use for feats. Each one of the backgrounds comes with a talent in itself, but it's a unique talent specific to a specific list of talents, such as field medic, mental fortitude, and ritualist for the adherent, and so forth. So you have a whole nice little list of talents here, as well as backgrounds. So it goes through the backgrounds, and then it goes through listing all the talents that you can get from the backgrounds. Very much like the Dungeons & Dragons 2024 Player's Handbook. They separate it into the magic category, and then the general, then the martial category, and then general category. Like technical talents and so forth. Then you have weapons and equipment right here. And I do like the fact that they include a lot of artwork for the armors and stuff like that. They actually expand out the options a little bit here. They have for light armor, padded, leather, studded leather, and brigandine. It's nice to get brigandine in the system. And then you have the table right here for your armors. And you have some don off and don on chart right there. You have a nice little section of your weapons right here. Pretty much all the standard stuff. Plus a few things. And then artwork of the actual weapons themselves. So if you've never seen such a things before, there you go. And it continues on into it. And then there's also various characteristics such as hamstring, pin shot, pull, ricochet shot, trip. And then they talk about weapon materials like adamantine, silvered, and so forth. And then there's weapon properties here. Price chart for all your equipment like books and candles and all other things. Explanation of container capacity for various things such as a treasure chest and baskets and barrels and vials and water skins. A little section on poison usage, object structures, and so forth. Then you have a little section on your tools, explaining what they can be used for and so forth. Very much like the Dungeons & Dragons 2024 version of the Player's Handbook. This actually is nicely laid out very much in that style, or slash Xanathar's Guide to Everything, where they have each one in a little column, and it tells you what kind of tasks you can do, associated ability scores tied to them. So like clother tools, associated abilities is dexterity and charisma. It lists out the components, crafting items, what you can make with them, and the direct connection to where you could find the rules for crafting. And it continues on from there. You got mounts, services, vehicles. Got simple land vehicles. You got some sea vehicles such as a galley and a keelboat, and a few more things. Then you go into listing of explaining what rarity is and what attunement is, pricing, and many other things. You got some unique, interesting items that are included here. Levers of the apparatus, and so forth. So you actually get some unique magic items, such as the bag of tricks, the bag of beans, the bag of holding, and so forth, in this book as well. So unlike the Player's Handbook for Dungeons & Dragons 2014 or Dungeons & Dragons 2024 Player's Handbook, you actually do have magic items in your Player's Handbook. So the players can actually look it up. There's prices for them. Like the Boots of Galloping are 25 gold pieces. Boots of Levitation are 4,000 gold pieces. Belts of Dwarven Kind are 8,000 gold pieces. Now, the only problem with having the magic items and the prices in the Player's Handbook is that due to having the prices and the magic items in the Player's Handbook, sometimes players will come to the notion that they can go immediately to buy these magic items whenever they want, whenever they want, and that might not be the case in your campaign setting. And then some players will be a little obsessed, like, oh, I want to buy a Cube of Force, or I want to buy a Dancing Lockpick. Dancing Lockpick is only 50 gold. What do you mean it's 80 gold, Game Master? Kind of thing like that. Sometimes some things will be more expensive than what the book says, and sometimes they're cheaper, depending on where you're buying them from. But anyways, it is nice that you have a bunch of magic items in here. I just don't know about the pricing being in here. That's typically a thing I much prefer to see in a Game Master's Guide. You got a section on fabled magic items, which are basically artifacts, which is I personally don't like at all being in a Player's Handbook. You got a section on skill descriptions, like insight, history, and so forth. Whole sections on monsters, deaths, conditions, and so forth, which is nice. You got rules on your combat mechanics and so forth. Explanation on spells, on your circles, from first circle to ninth circle. Instead of levels, they use the term circles, which actually is really nice. They talk about various sources such as the arcane source, the primal, a divine source, the primordial source, and the weird source, which is basically a cult in Pathfinder 2nd edition, and so forth. They go over charting of how all the mechanics of a spell works in here. They have the nice list of all the spells by their source, such as arcane, divine, primal, and weird. And then they list out all the spells in here. And then when you get to the very back end of the spell section, there is also a section on rituals. As rituals are actually, I do believe, if I remember correctly, are separated into their own category. All the spells are alphabetized, and the beginning of each letter has a big letter in the wherever it starts up. So there's a G. So that's the start of the G section. That's always nice to have stuff like that, because that makes it easier to find stuff quickly. If you are quickly flipping and you end up landing on a section, you have to ask your question. There you go. And then we have a list on conditions. The rituals are mixed in, and they also overlap on the spells. You have the conditions and the appendix on the gods for the main setting for Tales of the Valiant. And you got a little appendix for creatures in the back, much like the Player's Handbook. Please note that there's very few pieces of artwork for the creatures in this book, which is a downside. And then you have an index right here, which basically lists out all the major terms in the book. but only the major terms, not the moderate or mild terms. And then you have 2 character sheets back here. The character sheets are overall very nice. However, some of the boxes, such as the treasures and equipment, features and traits, and a few others, are too small. Much like the Dungeons and Dragons 2024 player character sheets, they're way too small. So that's sad. You got the Monster Vault book, which I have right here. Ow. Set the book right down on top of my finger. The Monster Vault book. So there you go. And then advertisements for all the other products from Kobold Press. And then the Game Master's Guide that's just coming soon. So overall, I feel that this is a more direct evolution of Dungeons and Dragons 2014 than even Dungeons and Dragons Dungeons and Dragons 2024 is. However, they do change around a few things, and then they do make a few choices from what I saw in there that I don't entirely agree with, like putting class before ability score or ability score determination. So if you roll, if your default option is rolling for your character stats, it's kind of awkward to decide that you're going to be a cleric and then roll and then find out that you have too few good stats for your cleric, or you decide to play a wizard and then you find out you roll a bunch of really good rolls, and like, okay, do I really want to play a wizard or do I want to try a monk? Because this is a rare moment for me to play a monk and be able to really play a monk really well. So there you go. The magic items in the book are like on that edge, like, and then yes, I kind of don't want to have magic items in the player's handbook, but then you got the artifacts in there, and that's like definitely a no. There should not be artifacts in your player's handbook at all. I'm okay with having common magic items in the player's handbook, very much so. Like stuff that is so low power and so common that it's not going to really affect your game very much, but it's nice flavoring for the players to discover. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Slightly rarer stuff or the uncommon stuff, yeah, that's like on the edge. And then you got the rare, the very rare, and the artifact. Like, I don't want that stuff in the player's handbook at all. Seriously. I don't want that stuff in the player's handbook. Yeah, those pages could be saved and put into something else in the player's handbook, such as like better descriptions for class features or something else like more a replay of how to play the system or something like that, or a question and answer section or something like that. Or a rules glossary just listing all the characteristics or mechanics in the system, such as flat-footed or something like that, or half cover, full cover, and stuff like that, and giving a quick description and the page number where to find it. That's better. But putting the high-end magic items in a player's handbook is like, I'd really rather not have that be the case. So overall, I do say that the artwork is exceptional in the book. The price is exceptionally good for a hardcover book of this size. So I like that very much. Most of the explanations are very nice. There's some choices in organization where they put like a thing before a thing that I'd much rather be organized the other way, or extrapolate, and then they put things in there I don't care for so much. This is one of those like, and this is probably like a 3.75 star thing, and it's hard to say if it's superior to Dungeons and Dragons 2024. It's one of those things I would have to like get a group of people to actually sit down and play. But I do say that it is a improvement over the Dungeons and Dragons 2014. So that's a definite in that category. So is this a situation where Tales of the Valiant is a superior option compared to Level Up Advanced 5th Edition or the Broken Weave? I don't know. I don't have the Broken Weave yet, and it's in the mail. But Level Up Advanced 5th Edition, I already did a video on it. You can find it on my channel. And then I also did a video covering the Player's Handbook for D&D 2024, and you can also find that on the channel as well. And this is one of those really tough moments here. It's hard to say which is truly the superior system between the three for your next step in your Dungeons and Dragons or fantasy adventure or game system. So it's one of those things I'm going to have to sit down, spend a ton of time reading through these books in greater depth, and maybe get some people to actually play, say, like a Level Up Advanced 5th Edition campaign or adventure, or a Tales of the Valiant campaign or adventure, and really find out exactly which system is more natural and better overall. I do have a general feel that this one is like a weird bend off in the evolution of Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition up here. You kind of just like, instead of just like following the natural evolution of Dungeons and Dragons 5th Edition 2014, the 2024 D&D, he kind of just takes it and morphs it off to a slightly alternative variant of itself, where Tales of the Valiant feels like it's like more of a natural evolution in line with D&D, but it's not a radical upgrade. It changes up a bunch of things, it changes a bunch of terms, and straightens a bunch of things out, and reclassifies things for more clarity. Where Level Up is more of a, they took the basic structure of this, and then they built on top of that multiple more layers on top of it, and making it a lot more complex than in this or Tales of the Valiant or 2024 is. So my preliminary thoughts are Level Up Advanced 5th Edition might be your more crunchy Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition variant, where Tales of the Valiant and Dungeons & Dragons 2024 is more of your A-B variant situation, where evolutionary wise it just continues on from it, but one took a slight different path off to the one way, and then the other one took off in the other way slightly. So it's one of those things we have to try to play around with and find out. So overall, my personal thoughts on this is it's a 3.75 star situation with this book. I really want to see a starter set for Tales of the Valiant. I do happen to have, as I said before, or showed you, the Monster Vault book for Tales of the Valiant. And I also happen to have the Game Master screen for Tales of the Valiant as well. And the Tales of the Valiant Game Master screen is very much in line with the 2014 Player's Handbook. So there you go. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe on the channel. Leave a comment if you have any questions. I probably will read more in depth and then answer those questions in the comments. If you go to the other two videos and you have questions, feel free to ask questions in those videos about those systems. Some of the video might actually answer some of your questions about them. So just go ahead and watch it. And then if you have any other questions, I will look it up in the book and type out the answer for you in the comments. So there you go. Have a delightful day, a nice night, a wonderful week, and a magnificent month, and see you next time. Ciao.